to the April 17th meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission. Please silence your electronic devices at this time. And if you can have a private conversation, please take it outside. Thank you. First up, vote minutes, March 13th. Somewhere here.
So I'm trying to silence it, sorry.
All right, everybody else gets a free pass. Go ahead. All right, did anybody read them?
Yes, I read them and I make a motion to accept as
Second.
presented.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion, corrections, or other? Hearing none, call for the vote to accept the minutes of March 13th. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right.
Yes.
Request for a continuance for determination of applicability,
Yes.
Franklin Stearns, 322 Surf Drive, Falmouth, Mass., for permission to upgrade septic system to a tight tank.
Mr. Chair, the applicant requested to continue this to the 24th of April.
So moved.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Unanimous. All right, requests for determination of applicability. First up, Cameron Dawson, 0 Edgewater Drive West, number 41-06-000-067B, East Falmouth, Mass., for permission to license an existing pier and float.
Mr. Chair, the applicant requested to continue this until May 1st.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
we have a motion and a second to continue. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay, next one, Franklin Stearns, that's already been continued. John Torpy Jr., trustee, 120 Highland Avenue, North Falmouth, Mass., for permission to construct a single-car detached garage and install mitigation plantings.
Mr. Chair, the staff recommends a -2 under the state and -3 determination under the bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Next up, McDougal's Cape Cod Marine Service, Inc., 145 Falmouth Heights Road, Falmouth, Mass., for permission to repair and maintain the travel lift bulkhead.
Mr. Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Unanimous. Janice Bucieri, 81 Shorewood Drive, East Falmouth, Mass., for permission to pump, fill, and abandon cesspools and install Title V septic system.
Mr. Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and a -3 under the bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Unanimous. So moved. Request for hearing under a notice of intent. All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are held simultaneously under the authorities of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision of the commission is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. I think I misstated that. Authorities of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act. No, I think it's dot all the i's, cross the t's, whatever. First up, Peter and Diane Worth, 88 Gardner Road, Woods Hole, Falmouth, for permission to reconstruct and maintain the existing concrete perimeter wall and gate, construct a patio, reconfigure existing driveway, landscaping and all associated excavating, grading, planting restoration, and mitigation plantings. Mr. McGrath.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Somehow I've lost, you normally bring 11 by 17s, and somehow I've lost it.
That's too many.
That's good.
That's good. That's
I can
good.
see it all right. Then we're all in
No,
the
no,
dark.
no, that's
Nope,
not good.
switch, yeah.
Just the red dots.
There you go. is fine. It's good enough.
My name is Michael McGrath. I'm a registered professional engineer
Thank you.
and a registered land surveyor, and we have filed this notice. This site it's got a single-family house. There's an isolated vegetated wetland that's on the northerly property line. It has frontage on Buzzards Bay. There's a beach. It's not a real beach, it's a rocky intertidal shore is what I should have described it as. There's riprap that's shown that's continual. Then there is a significant, very significant masonry wall that starts out at Gardner Road, goes down this town landing, and goes all the way to the top of the riprap, and then there's a transition piece here. The wall comes across and it comes back up so that there is basically almost an interior courtyard. The work that we're going to do is to reconstruct this wall. And in the notice was a copy of a license where the town of Falmouth Selectmen have given the owners a license to reconstruct this wall in place. In order to do that, we're going to end up having to disturb some of the plantings in the town layout. So the existing wall will be removed and replaced. There's a plan by a structural engineer in the notice. The existing vegetation will have to be removed and replaced. So if you've been to the site, it's basically a stony surface with scattered indigenous plants. There's other work on the site. There's going to be a proposed patio in this location that I'm shown here. There's existing stairs down and small decks. There's some additional paved stone paths that come out to the front entrance. There's a proposed reinforced turf parking lot in this area. There's an alteration of some Rosa rugosa in this area. There's a proposed wood bin and a proposed pervious walkway that comes up and surrounds the area. And we have shown here, there's an existing landscape bed, but it's got, it doesn't have the right plants in it, so we're going to plant this with the appropriate kind of plants. There's a naturally vegetated area here, so we're going to expand on it. So the proposed native mitigation plants are 460 square feet, and we filed in the notice a description of how we came up with that particular calculation. It's based on the increased areas that are in the B and multiplied by the appropriate increase. There was a report from the staff that asked me a bunch of questions. From the aerial photographs, this area used to be lawn and now it's crushed stone. So it's definitely crushed stone, and so there's a generator there, and I had a hard time making out what was there on the aerial photographs, but you can definitely make out that this was all lawn at one time. They also brought up the point that there was a kayak rack here. It's been there for, well, it doesn't show up in the 2010 or 2011 aerial photographs. So we haven't, the bottom line is our owners are in Europe, and we need to have their permission on how and what to do to change or mitigate the kayak rack. Accompanying me tonight is the landscape architect from Zen Associates, and he should at least describe the mitigation plants. And then Bob Ahmed's here to answer any other questions that you might have concerning this. But I think, except for the few issues that were brought up tonight, this is a perfectly approvable project. You're, as I say, you're, yeah.
Tim Houlihan, a landscape architect with Zen Associates, we're out of Woburn, Massachusetts. So as Mike mentioned, there's a sizable area of mitigation planting. There is a plan list that was been submitted as part of the notice. It includes bayberry, beach plum, winterberry, bearberry, a handful of plants that we like to think are good hardy native plants appropriate for this this site. In addition to the planting, I'll walk you through briefly some of the details of the project. So I'm outlining here the wall that exists today that is in need of reconstruction. So that's, that wall will get built in much of a similar manner as exists today, with some minor ornamental kind of detail modifications. This area is a proposed stone patio. It's going to consist of a granite stone sand set. We've got two existing wood deck stair systems that get you from the house down to the proposed stone terrace. This area here is intended to become a Japanese-style garden with natural boulders, natural and sawn granite pavers, and the beige color here represents a crushed stone paving. It's set on a gravel, so a pervious kind of paving surface. This area here is a portion of existing asphalt paving that's going to be replaced with a gravel paving. This area then is the reinforced turf paving. The gravel paving then continues down the side of the garage to get you to this area of existing wood deck and existing wood step. The lawn here remains. This is a patch of existing rugosa rose that's intended to stay. We'd like to replace this end of the existing rugosa rose with lawn planting. The area outside the wall then, which, as Mike mentioned, will be disturbed as part of the construction of the reconstruction of the existing wall. It consists now largely of some ornamental planters that are just kind of randomly spaced out there. There's a lot of Montauk daisy. The thought is, and the client is on board for replacing all of this area with what we'd like to think is a more appropriate mix of native plants that are probably offer more benefit than the Montauk daisy. There's a handful of existing boulders, these gray, this graphic here with these gray things. There's existing boulders that line the walkway. Those will get moved to the side as part of the construction and then kind of reset. That's kind of a quick tour of the project. Any questions on that?
John?
What's the date of your plan, sir?
This plan is October 29th, 2018.
We're looking at a plan March 11th, 2019. Are they different in some way?
Good question. In the 2000, the updated plan,
Doesn't have that little red kind of, that, yep. What is that?
at this time, in October, we had intended to do what's illustrated here, right? Remove the existing rugosa rose from this area and replace it with lawn. That's since been updated, presumably to the plan you're looking at. The existing rugosa rose in that area is just gonna stay
Okay.
as it is.
Okay.
And did you say around all those pavers, it's gonna be crushed stone?
In this area,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Yeah, so,
Mike? Thank you. We're probably gonna have to update your mitigation calculations, Mike, to reflect the shell that's on the ground, and try to figure out when that went in, because that is considered pervious, surface that doesn't support natural vegetation, okay?
I understand what you are saying, and what the thing I would point out is, if I can go back to mine, I'm a little slow. What we're talking about is that this area in here used to be lawn, and now it's crushed stone, right?
Back.
it's more or less crushed shell, but yeah.
Well, what I would point out to you is that this area is completely enclosed by a solid structure that lie between that and the resource area buffer. So the removal of lawn and replacement with shells is, I don't think it would have an adverse effect on the wetland. So,
I'm not saying it has an adverse effect on the wetland, Mike, I'm just saying if it's within the commission's jurisdiction, it follows a certain mitigation requirement. Okay?
if someone does something and the activity is not gonna affect any of the resource areas, you should be considering the actual impact. So that's my statement, so I hope you
We'll let
understand.
the board decide, and Betsy's already rolling her eyes at you, so we'll move on.
Well, that's not
Mike.
appropriate to roll her eyes.
No, I'm teasing you.
May I say something?
Yes,
now?
you may, in 1 second. Mike, the pipe, the discharge pipe that's going into the wetland, that will need to be addressed
Yes.
before we can close this. And the kayak rack will either need to be mitigated for, removed from the wetland, relocated, okay?
Yes, and so we will have to ask for a continuance because my client's in Europe, and
No, I
we didn't
understand.
hear about these issues till today.
Yes, I understand
So I'm
that.
trying
But
to be
also,
responsive.
Mr. McGrath, the proposed reinforced turf area, I'll need a cross-section on that, and that also might need to be mitigated for. We've been seeing a lot of them. They take different forms. The board, has discussed requiring mitigation for them, so we'll need to see your cross-section on that. Depending on what that is, the board will decide whether or not they want to mitigate for that, okay?
I understand.
Thank you. And as far as the landscape architecture, I don't have any questions, thank you, sir. Do you?
Are there any other questions I can answer?
That's it.
Mike, we've had this discussion before. We're well aware of the fact that your client won't be using nitrogen fertilizer on this lawn because it's within 100 feet of resources. And as minimal as it might be, grass takes up nitrogen. So to say it has no impact is, you're the one who's made this argument on the other side.
I thought I was accused of heresy when I said that lawns removes And I even had Mr. Petrovic come to Cape Cod and testify in one of the,
No, I agree
applications, so.
with you. I would much rather have woody vegetation, but grasses take up nitrogen.
at,
That's Jen's point. It has a function in the zone. So think about her request.
I understand your request. All I'm saying is that most of the time, we're worried about surface runoff having an adverse effect on a wetland. That's why we have these different resource area buffers. And if you look at what your statements are, is you keep, the assumptions are always is that if there's activity within a resource area buffer, it's going to affect a wetland. Here, I'm saying to you that you could easily overcome that because that area is surrounded by solid structures, so no runoff's going to reach there.
I
And-
realize that, but
And the other,
rain that falls on that has nitrogen, and that will be taken up, would have been taken up had there been lawn there. I realize it's de minimis, but to
It's-
say that it has no function is not correct.
And Mr. McGrath, would be one of the first to calculate that area as pervious surface or impervious surface and calculate it towards a future project on this site. You cannot count it one way and not count it the other. I've said that since day one.
I've never tried to double count things, God, So, all I will tell you is that we're going to need a continuance to discuss the few things. I understand your point. In any case,
I have some more questions. Come back around. Or, you want me to continue? So my other question is, your pervious walkway around the house,
yes,
what's that gonna be made of?
and you have to come to the microphone.
Crushed gravel.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, and I just have one other comment. As Jen will remember years ago, and then she got an AmeriCorps person to follow up on this. I went around the shoreline at one point. I went from North Falmouth to Woods Hole, documenting all the public access to the shoreline. And this public access had those planters in it, sort of preventing some people from accessing, very limiting the access. So I'm just wondering,
But there's nothing blocking the access now.
well, those planters are still there. There's a small walking access. But what I'm wondering is, who owns that, where it says Town Landing?
The town of Falmouth,
Town.
you
To the
have,
right, no, to the right, where you're gonna put those plants there.
this is, the town owns the complete 40-foot. It says public 40-foot wide. And I produced and filed with a notice, a license from the Board of Selectmen, saying that we could obviously disturb this area and that we would have to replant it back to its existing condition.
All right, so the selectmen know that.
I filed a license, yes.
All right.
My testimony earlier was that I have a license or approval from the town. I can't come before you unless I have that license.
Well, that license is just to disturb it, not necessarily to plant a garden out there. Is that right?
That'll come up.
You actually asked them?
Let Mr. Armand come up.
For your record, I'm Bob Ament, Falmouth attorney. I represented the applicant before the Board of Selectmen and drafted the license, which was reviewed by town council and approved and has been issued. And we're holding the signed license. A couple points to make. One, no portion of the structure of the wall will be on the town property. That was entirely on the Worth's property. But in order to rebuild it, we have to do some excavation along it. That, of course, will disturb the vegetation. And the license requires us and allows us to restore the vegetation. So, we have to do all of that. I do think that Mike has suggested that the new plantings that will be in that extensive area along the wall on the town property will be, I think, quite an improvement over the plantings that are there now. And hopefully although that's not reducing impervious area, it is, I think, going to be a significant improvement. Probably the new plants will take up more nitrogen, and maybe you'll take that into account in weighing some of the other issues. But we'll come back to you with proposals to address all those points. If there are any other questions about the license, I'd be happy to try to answer it.
Yep,
Thank you.
thanks.
Kevin?
No questions at this time. No questions.
Steve?
No questions.
Wow. Peter?
No questions.
Mark?
No questions or comments.
All right, covered that pretty well.
We have a continuance.
Some different,
Yeah.
Mike, how long is it gonna take you to reach out to your clients and make the appropriate adjustments?
I would think I would need 2 weeks.
2 weeks to file or 2 weeks? 2 weeks to file the,
Oh, I need 2 weeks to file.
okay, so the 8th of May?
I hereby request that this hearing be continued to May 8th, 2019.
So moved.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Wait, he had a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to be sure nothing of that is contingent upon being able to, for the owner to come back from Europe, as you've indicated?
I think we'll be able to have appropriate communication with the owner in the next couple of weeks to allow the filing. Thank you.
Thank you.
May 8th?
Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second to continue until May 8th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Next up, excuse me, Falmouth Yacht Club, 0 Clinton Ave, number 46B, 02-020-00H, Falmouth, Mass. For permission to continue beach maintenance and nourish the beach with 500 cubic yards of sand.
Good evening, my name is Michael McGrath. I'm a registered engineer and professional land surveyor. My firm, Holmes McGrath, filed the notice of intent that's tonight, you heard just now. And what I've done is I forgot my 11 by 17, so we'll have to, sorry about that. This is a small beach that is basically across the street from Falmouth Yacht Club. And you have seen this before in that there was a previous order of conditions that authorized virtually the same beach nourishment. This site has got currently, it's on Vineyard Sound, so it's land under the ocean, land containing shellfish. There's a coastal bank in the riprap, there's a coastal dune. This is currently a stony beach, and it was a sandy beach. So the proposal is to bring in compatible sand that I've colored in yellow. We don't go below this heavy line, so we stay above mean high water. And there's 500 cubic yards of sand. We gave you a sieve analysis of what was used before, and so we're gonna use the same type of sand. Jennifer asked me today a question about how much, there was 600 yards used before, and she said to me, how much is gone? So I wrote a letter, And she objected to the letter, saying that I needed to describe how I did the calculations. So I have a schematic plan for you, and what I did was, in the pink, which are actually tan, are the observations that exist today on top of the stony surface, so these pink ones. And the bright yellow ones were the ones that were in 2012. In AutoCAD, you can construct basically two model surfaces and based on the elevations. And the calculations were 604 cubic yards. I rounded to 600 because of we can't be that precise. The differences of 1/10 of a foot can introduce a significant error. So I wrote a letter saying it was 600 yards, and Jen said I had to show some way how I calculated. So I did bring 11 by 17s of the wrong plan.
Thank you, Mike, I appreciate that.
And I have full-scale stamp ones too. So, time is one of my sayings. The first thing you do is memory, followed by the hearing. What?
Do you have the full scale one?
Yes.
Okay, give that one to Betsy, please. That's the 7 year.
She has a full scale one?
Yeah.
And I brought 10 copies of the stamped.
No, we don't need 10 copies, Mike, just that's
I appreciate it, Mike.
We appreciate
I
that,
was
Mike,
the one who
thank you.
left it. I don't appreciate having to fold this, though. That's okay.
Betsy, I'll take it.
I was gonna say something,
Please don't.
At the podium,
but.
at the podium.
So, the bottom line is, this is an activity that's been done before, and and I think it's entirely appropriate it continues. This was a Beta Beach for many, many years. In any case, I'm here to answer any questions you might have concerning this notice of intent.
Mike, are you doing beach maintenance activities as
Oh,
well,
yes.
correct?
I'm sorry, we described that we would also, in the notice, it describes that we will rake the beach and do the normal kind of activities you see at the beach, especially that the town does, where they rake the beach, so that it's suitable without all the ground deposited, I'm not sure what you call it, but y'all know, it's dead eelgrass. But in any case, that gets removed.
The rack.
Well, you'll need to leave 10% of the rack like ever. Okay,
Well, that's what you conditioned it.
thank you. And that's just for the record, food source for migrating shorebirds. Somebody pass that down to Betsy, please. Thank you. Anything, Brendan?
No, that's gonna be my own comment.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you for the illustration there. And just for the record, we didn't print it out. Mr. McGrath did send in an opinion letter this afternoon regarding what he thought the cubic yardage should be, and we just haven't printed out, so we'll be placing that in the record. Okay, just for the, and that's what prompted the plan. I can read it to you if you'd like, it's 2 whole sentences.
That's
Okay.
okay.
I-
We'll,
I can tend to be terse when I need to be.
Dave Burrell this time.
Thank you. The existing cobble, you're right, it's a very stony beach now, and I actually can remember it being a sandy beach, and the size of the cobbles are significant. I mean, they're not pebbles. And you're just gonna go right over all that?
That's what we've done in the past,
Really?
yes.
Okay. Fine,
Good base.
okay. That's my only question.
Peter?
Okay, I want to clarify that the applicant is requesting permission for 600 cubic yards, not 500.
It's 500, not 600. It's 500,
We've
not
asked for
600.
500. 600 was put in before.
Okay.
Now there's less land because of the difference. If you open up your 11 by 17s, you'll see I have the old mean high water and the new mean high water. And we can only go within a certain distance of mean high water. So we applied for 500. We put 600 last time.
Okay, so this application is for 500. And the, in the document with the blue lettering, the mean high water 2012 versus the 2019, are you going to put sand further toward the ocean than the 2019 mean high water?
No, we cannot do that.
Okay.
If you look at what this
Okay.
plan shows, the heavy heavy dashed line is the limit of the beach nourishment, and the heavy blue line is mean high water. My testimony is we don't go down all the way to mean high water because there's a hell of a lot more permits involved. So,
Okay. No further questions.
I colored that wrong there, but the heavy dashed line is the limit of the beach nourishment.
Mark?
No questions.
Who benefited from the 500 yards
Vineyard Sound?
over the last 7 years?
I don't know. What is very surprising to me is the last 2 years, we've done some work where we're pipe and plover and the pipe and plover seem to love brand new sand, which is contrary to what most of us assume.
Let's see.
So basically, Mike, this is approximately a foot of sand on the existing
Yes,
surface?
yes.
And I've two other questions that aren't directly related to your project, but when does Vineyard Sound turn into Nantucket Sound? At what point along the
I
Falmouth coast?
don't know, but it's Vineyard Sound all the way over to New Seabury, and then it's Nantucket Sound over there.
So you say it switches at New Seabury?
I have a client, and he did an awful lot of work, so I got used to saying Nantucket Sound over on,
Okay, well, some people call East Falmouth Nantucket Sound off East Falmouth too. I'm just curious. So my next question is, your 2019 mean high water,
yes.
where does that come from?
We have a software program that we enter the values in, and there is, the Corps of Engineers has published a formula where you can calculate the gradual increase of mean high water over time, so we use that. Vineyard Sound may have come up more, but there's not enough data to say that. So the crew was also supposed to spot the rack line, so it's a combination of both. We use our judgment on that.
But and so your 2012 was calculated that way also?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. That's all.
Kevin?
I'll keep my mouth shut. No questions at this time.
Courtney?
No questions.
All right.
I'll make a motion, to close the hearing, and take it under advisement.
Second.
Sorry.
What's that mean?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of closing the hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, unanimous. So moved. Next up, Jennifer Linville, 91 Gunning Point Avenue, Falmouth, Mass. For permission to perform invasive species management, install native plantings, create a footpath, and modify existing deck.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Michael Boselli from Falmouth Engineering. I represent the applicant along with Maria Hickey of Maria Hickey and Associates. Maria's firm designed the invasive plant management system, and attached to our notice of intent was a methodology for your review. The property in question is number 91 Gunning Point Avenue. It has frontage on Gunning Point Avenue and Sippowiset Road to the east. The lot contains just over 50,000 square feet of land. Adjacent wetland resources include a BVW to the very, I guess it'd be southwest side. There are also 2 isolated wetlands that are also shown on the plan. And we also delineated by virtue of the fact that the land is sloping to meet the slope definition of DEP's policy for coastal banks, a coastal bank that's sort of, I'm gonna call it a fragment because it becomes less than 10-to-1 in all other areas in the flood zone surrounding this yellow shaded area. But nevertheless, that area meets the definition of coastal bank. The property also has 2 flood zones on it. And this this blue line represents the boundary of between AE 16 and VE 16. Because there's a velocity zone, we've also represented on the plan the 25-foot parallel Falmouth wetland regulation velocity zone as a black dashed line. And that shows on the plan as well. The property has also on it a single-family dwelling that was issued in order of conditions some years back. House, driveway, enclosed porch, and a deck that has a rather unique shape. Part of the plan before you tonight is to get permission to square off the deck, if you will. I'll zoom in on this. Specifically, this shaded area here, proposed deck addition approximately 120 square feet, and it'll be supported by 3 sonotubes. And the sonotubes will have columns up to the deck. If you've been to the property, you would have seen that if you walk around the side of the house, the deck is effectively above your head because it's a walkout on that side of the house due to the topography. So this deck actually is up in the air, and we're proposing that the sonotubes be inset so that they're installed in an area that's already disturbed, and that there'd be a slight cantilever of the deck so that it becomes flush with the existing deck, so that the deck in this area is more usable. We're also hopeful that we can put a second-story deck above the existing deck and the proposed squared-off new portion of the deck. The significant project in this case, well, before I get to that, in addition to that activity, we're also proposing 2 other activities in this area. Namely, we're seeking permission to allow a 4-foot wide meandering path through the property down to Flume Pond, which is to the south and west of here. It crosses over land of Conley, but you'll see in our application that we enclosed a memorandum of understanding between the 2 property owners, which will allow the applicant who acquired the property from Mr. Conley to cross over and make use of the enjoyment of the Flume Pond area. In addition, we're asking for permission to do vista pruning in a 25-foot wide area that is straddling the meandering path, and that would, vista window would be, the work would be done in accordance to your vista pruning standards. Finally, the most significant activity we're proposing, which is invasive plant management. You can see on this plan some shaded colors, which represent various types of plant material that are proposed. This entire area is completely invaded with aggressive plants such as bittersweet and other varieties that Maria can describe better than I can. So we're proposing to fully restore this, revitalize it, including installation of some trees and significant native plantings all in this area so that this area can be brought back to a more healthy state. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Maria, and she can go through the details of the invasive management portion of the project.
Good evening, everyone. For the record, I am Maria Hickey from Maria Hickey and Associates Landscapes. I'll try not to talk too loud because I can hear the echo in the hallway. So recently, 91 Gunning Point Road has, the property has transferred hands, and Jennifer Linville is the new owner of the property. I have spent some time out here this winter, actually before the property even changed hands, and then once it did, meeting with her and walking the property to kind of do an inventory of what's there and what we would like to have there. For starters, when Michael used the word meandering, we want the path to meander so we can kind of go through all the trees and have limited disruption to the existing trees that are there. If I went a straight line, I'd have to pull out some trees, and we don't want to do that. We just want to have a nice little winding path through the woods. The significant area of this property, if any of you have been out there, you'll see is right along this track around Gunning Point Avenue and Sippowisset Road. Currently, there's 3 dead trees, and most likely these trees have died because they have become so encased and enveloped in non-native invasive vines such as porcelainberry, bittersweet, et cetera, that those vines are even growing into the overhead wires. Did any of you go out to take a look? So you know what I'm talking about. So it's a safety concern. It also doesn't give you clear visibility pulling in and out of that road because it's just a wall of chaos, is the best way to describe it. And the area is devoid of any really native vegetation. So, in fact, the non-native invasive vegetation has enveloped this area here along the side of the driveway where previous mitigation plants were installed. And as part of our invasive species management, we are going to remove these native shrubs and remove all the vines and the invasive vegetation and then replant new mitigation plants. Because right now they're so compromised, it's like a blanket of vines. I don't even know if they're alive under there, to be honest with you. So it's easier just to go in and clear them out and see what we have from there. At the corner of the proposed deck, there are 2 native trees that our client is very adamant about wanting to protect. They provide nice screening from, people coming down the road and also this way over here. One is a holly and the other is a cedar. Jen and I talked about at some point as the holly matured, if there were any branches that came into the deck, would meet and tag those and get pre-approval if any of those did need to be pruned. But as far as we're concerned, they don't come into play with the deck extension. There is a black oak right here that has a split leader, and if anyone walked out back and looked, it's leaning at the house, and half the tree is already dead. The part that is alive, I did cut into a few branches and I found active gall wasp disease. So we are requesting permission to remove that tree. It's not a matter, is it gonna fall, it's just when. And that's kind of an unnerving thing, especially if it's coming through the roof. In return, we are seeking permission to replant a higher habitat value landscape, one that offers trees, native shrubs, wetland plants, grasses, native perennials, pollinators, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This whole area that you see that's colored in is the area where we're going to go in and remove all the non-native invasive vegetation. And obviously, we'll put in our erosion control barriers and protect everything. And the circles indicate where we're gonna plant tupelo trees, and the reason that I chose tupelo trees is the land does slope towards the wetland, and they will help absorb, they love having their feet wet, they'll help absorb if there is any road runoff, et cetera, et cetera. And it gives us great structure for nesting birds or any of that type of stuff. And it also provides a canopy. There's nothing there now. It's just almost like a vacant lot that's overgrown with things that don't belong there. The pink area along the road denotes where I'm going to do a buffer of pollinator perennials, densely planted. When I say densely planted, a plant every 2 feet or less, 1 gallon perennials. We're using all native perennials that I listed in this plant list that will help encourage restoration of bees, butterflies, and then hopefully even some nesting native songbirds. Right now, currently, there's a limited habitat value, so again, the whole purpose of this project is to provide an increased habitat value, some trees, and deal with a situation right now where the current mitigation plants are just completely overgrown. The path that meanders through the woods, we're gonna denote that path by planting clethra and blueberry. The clethra will help pollinate the blueberry and, again, create habitat value. Do you have any questions?
Before I get to Maria, Mike, I have a couple of questions on the deck. So the deck, we went out to look at, you're extending that out? You're extending that out, correct?
Well, we're squaring it off.
Squaring it off, and then you're putting a second story on it? Is
Yes.
that what you're saying?
This
Yeah.
area here has deck. This area currently doesn't have deck, so we hope
No,
this.
but that's the deck that exists out there, correct?
This exists, yes. So this is new, but
But is it gonna be 2 levels?
yes.
Is there a level above it right now? I can't remember. I know there was a deck over on the other side that was above it.
This
my question-
only over
yeah.
here is on the
So my
level above.
question is, what is the total new deck, including the second story, in the velocity zone?
I didn't calculate that.
Well, that's kind of a big thing, since the board always asks to keep it under that 250 square feet. You might have been able to do that with your deck extension, but now you're putting this other deck on top, and so it's almost like you're putting a whole new deck out there, so I'd like to know what the square footage is in a velocity zone.
Yeah, I can do that. I
Okay.
just didn't calculate it. So that'll basically be, if you look at this black line here, this is the Falmouth velocity zone line, the 25-foot.
It'll be everything in there.
It'll be this, which is what in white color, and underneath currently exists deck. This would be new, so it'd be this area on a floor even above.
Will it be that area plus the yellow area, because that's the area you're squaring off?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, couple of things. The area where it's squaring off, and you see the little dots underneath, that was previously required mitigation for this house. This house had to receive a variance to go in, way back when, for the driveway.
Yes, I'm gonna call this a stippling hatch pattern here, these dots. So there's one small corner here that would cantilever over, and Maria and I, we did an inventory. I think there's like 3 blueberry bushes here that we'd have to relocate so that this corner could exist.
And you'd have no way around that corner.
Well, there's already no way around that corner. You go under the deck, because it's up in the air.
Okay, so I'm gonna need that information, so if we zoom out a bit. Go to Maria's. You're proposing in that hash mark, Maria, to remove mitigation plants that were required to put the house in and plant them with perennial pollinators. Is that what the plan says?
See this right here? This whole area?
Mm-hmm.
These are all native shrubs.
Mm-hmm.
These are all perennials that border Sipwasit Road.
No, I
Gunning
know,
Point.
but the hash mark says previous mitigation plants overgrown with invasives to be removed. And then I have pink that shows that you're gonna put perennials in their place.
Nope, these are all native shrubs. The previous mitigation plants in that area, I'm gonna remove so I can get all the non-native invasive vines out of there, and then I'm going to replant native shrubs in this area.
Well, that's not what the plan says.
Right.
This is what we have a problem with some of the plans. is
Okay.
That's not what the plan says.
Okay,
The
I
plan
thought,
as it reads means you're going to remove the mitigation plants that were required for the house,
Yep.
and you're gonna put pollinator plants, and I cannot accept that.
a clethra is a pollinator plant.
I understand, you know what I mean.
It's a native
No,
shrub.
But I understand that, but if I go to your list of pollinators,
Sure.
we're
And
not gonna put,
So I'm not putting any perennials in this band that goes along the
well,
driveway.
that's not what the plan says. The plan says that pink are native perennials and pollinators refer to plant lists.
Well,
So,
clarify the plan.
yeah,
It
please
was an
clarify the
oversight.
plan.
We
I
will fix
understand
the
that.
plan.
But what I'm saying is, we are seeing a lot of these invasive removal things, plans that are not clear, and we've had a problem with plans that are not clear, Mr. Boselli. So we're going to make these plans really tight, because
got
we've
it.
had a problem. And 2, the perennials along the road within the Zone A of the wetland is something I also, I don't wanna see perennials, I don't wanna see wildflower gardens. When you do an invasive species removal, project, even if it's in Zone B, the board does not have to allow you to remove your invasives and plant it with wildflower gardens or lawn or, something that is not appropriate to a wetland buffer just because it is in Zone B. The board has the discretion in a court case that says you have the discretion. So if we can do something to tighten up the plan, so I don't have a perennial border in a Zone A of a wetland, I'll be satisfied. The green part, and I'm just gonna clarify, the green part, Maria,
Yes,
you're gonna remove all of the invasives,
correct.
and you're gonna plant them at the density that's stated on your plan,
Correct.
that 3 foot on center in
Correct.
your staggered rows.
Correct.
Okay. So when you do your plans, you do keep to the density. And what
Yes.
have I always said? You can do
Yeah.
the perennial borders as long as it's in addition
Sure.
to the mitigation.
And around the wetland, I am gonna use a lot of Baccharis.
Yep.
Because I feel like it would be fantastic. In that instance, I'm probably gonna have you come out before I plant them, because those can grow pretty fat, so I might need to go 4 feet on the Baccharis, and just the
But
Baccharis.
we'll need to tighten that up. But this plan needs to have a little bit more language, and it needs to be tightened up so we don't kind of run afoul of what you're presenting, which is not clear on the plan.
Okay,
Okay?
you got it.
That said, Mike, are we offering mitigation for the increase in structure in their zone, or are we resting on the fact that we have this restoration plan? Or
We're
did
re-
I miss something?
We're resting on the fact that you have this almost an acre of restoration that we think is, you know, a huge improvement for a very small increase in deck. The only place I could add more mitigation planting would be in an area over here and up this edge. And I'd have to, if you were mandating that it be no closer than 10 feet to any of this, I'd have to, you know, run a band up along here, I suppose, or I could take out some patio and put some over here. But we thought that, given the fact that this is only a 120 square foot expansion of impervious surface, and we're gonna voluntarily do this significant invasives management, which is close to an acre of invasives management, that it was, on balance, a significant improvement, and that we wouldn't need any additional mitigation planting. That was our thought.
That'll be up to the board. So what I need, Mike, is a calculation on the
Yep.
velocity zone.
Yep.
Tighten up that hash marked area, because the
Yeah,
way
that's-
I read it is
that's
that,
fine.
and
We can-
we've had issues with plants in the past.
Yeah, this pink shouldn't be
Tighten
here.
up that pink area in the zone A of the buffer along the road, so I don't see the word perennial in that area.
Can you clarify, if I could, through you, Mr. Chairman?
That's that area right there.
From the green to the green, because that's A zone.
That's your
This-
A zone.
This can't be, this has to be woody shrubby.
According to staff. According to staff, most of the area should be woody shrubs, but we have seen some that, and you're saying that you're gonna plant it at the density in your plan, which is 2 gallon size, 3 feet on center, except for maybe the Baccharis where you want to. Do you have a count of each plant?
What was the question?
The count, do you have a plant count?
I don't,
Okay.
but I can provide that for you.
Okay, that would be great, if you wanna
Not
draw
a
that
problem
and
at all.
spread your Baccharis out a little bit,
Sure.
yeah.
And I did include the native perennials
What do you mean?
in the pink along the edge of the road
No, I know.
for
No, I know.
two reasons. Well, it's a large restoration project, and I want to keep my sight lines at the street low, because it does, your visibility is hindered, pulling in and out. I know that the DPW came in and cut before, and I don't want to see that happen again. So I'd rather have perennials. It's a narrow band along
I
the street.
understand that. I don't want to see perennials and set a precedent, like with a very slippery slope this board has gone down the last couple of months, to see perennials in a zone A of a wetlands. So,
Okay.
it's not gonna happen, Maria. The board might allow you to do it, but I'm saying the staff can't support that.
I think we understand, but the Zone A is only, from here
Mm-hmm,
to here.
I know.
Okay, so I didn't know if Maria was aware of that, so this is all,
So you still have your sight line at the road.
You still have your sight
still
line
have
at the
your sight
road.
line at the
Yeah,
road,
you still have the
exactly.
sight line on that corner.
because that's in a B zone. Like, the majority of it's in a B zone.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you do that work on the plan?
Yeah, absolutely.
The only other thing, Mike, it's a question for you. We had some calls today from people that were concerned that that path was going to eventually, trespass on additional property owners' properties to get eventually to the pond. So are we sure that it's only gonna cross Connolly's property? And that when your new client or the new owner starts going down her nicely created path, she doesn't inadvertently start trespassing on other people's properties?
I can't speak to that. I can tell you the application is to only do it on Mr. Connolly's property, which was all that was allowed under the memorandum of understanding. I can't say what someone may do in the future. That would be a violation and subject to enforcement, but I can't speak to it beyond that. I think that's, speculation.
I know, well, no, what I'm saying is, does Mr. Connolly's property go all the way to the pond? cause it kinda, it just kind of blanks off here.
Well, it goes beyond the wetland edge, but it got so far away, I didn't show anything further. I mean, we're proposing it just to the wetland edge.
Perhaps you could tell us when you come back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Only we've gotten multiple calls.
yeah, it's intended to only go to the location shown on the plan, which is
I
still on
understand that.
Conley's plan. On Conley's property.
But people see these plans and there's like a path to nowhere or a path that just terminates to, a wetland edge. And obviously, the intent is to get to the shoreline. So we wanna make sure that there's no,
Sure, I get
unintended trespassing implications there. So if you could just zone, but like pull the plan out and kinda give us a bigger view of it, Mike, you know what I'm talking about.
I might have that plan
Yeah,
in my
that would be great.
So, a couple of things I just wanted to add on your question for
And I will just
clarification.
alleviate, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Maria, we'll just alleviate some of the resident concerns, Mike. Okay.
So Jennifer Linville, so we're going to demarcate the sides of the path with shrubs.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be very easy to see exactly where the path is. My client has zero interest in paddleboarding, kayaking, canoeing, or even putting a toe in the water of the pond. I do have a client that lives 2 houses over that is declaring rights to the pond, that they're the only ones that can go canoeing, kayaking, whatever, which I already assured them, go over, knock on the door, say hi, you'll know right away. She's not the type of person that wants to do any type of a sport on the water. I can't guarantee you that she'll never walk to the end of the path, but she has zero interest or intention to
I'm
head
not
over,
concerned.
head in a westerly direction. Also, please note, there are tons and tons of invasive brambles and thorns, so you'd be ripped to shreds if you did try to trespass.
I'm just relaying
know.
the concerns our office has received.
Gotcha.
That's it. That's all the staff's concerns. Brendan, anything, did I miss anything?
No, you covered it.
Okay.
Mr. Byrd?
Since we're on the subject of the path, how far is it from the terminus of that path to the water?
Well, there's a big area of phragmites that you'd have to go through. We're not even clearing down that
No,
far.
no,
Yeah.
I just asked the question, how far?
I can answer it after the information I have a plan of record in my file, if you'd like me to submit it tonight, or I can submit it at the with the continuation revised plan.
He's gonna figure that out. with
Yeah,
the
well,
continuation.
I guess, yeah, because if there are issues with other property owners which aren't ours, that should be resolved, because it seems illogical to have a path that ends at a point you can't go any further. I guess that's, but who am I to say? I just work here. Anyway, when was the order of conditions that was originally issued for this house?
We have it right here, Courtney.
Yeah.
I was trying to find it in there.
I wasn't part of that case.
The reason I was on the board when when this was, and I believe you were on it too,
Betsy and Courtney were both on it.
May 2005.
yeah. And my recollection of this was that there was a good deal of concern on the commission at the time about the area where you're proposing that deck, and if you look at the design of the house, you notice it's sort of notched. And the deck was designed in such a way that it would not impinge on the area that you're now proposing to impinge on. And that was a big selling point. I don't know whether it was you that was doing the sales, but whoever was doing the sales on it, that was a big point, that this was designed so that it wouldn't impede on it. And now, all of a sudden, we're seeing, I guess, what we used to call creep. And so I have some concerns about that. You can maybe allay them for me, but I have some concerns about that.
If I could answer that, Mr. Chairman, Jen and I met about this, and she brought up that same exact fact. I scoured the file, I looked at minutes, I looked at notes, I looked at anything in the record. I looked on the ground. There's nothing unique. I have no idea why it was not notched, but if it were notched for some reason, there's no environmental reason that I know of that it couldn't be squared off. And I don't know if it was a selling point or not, but that's small.
Well, I
That's
think part of
small.
it was construction access.
It may have been, but all we have to do is install 3 sonotube footings and deck over that, and it can all be done by hand, no heavy equipment, no booming of material or anything. There's an access point right through here. So that's why we felt confident that it was something that could be approved.
And the second thing is, that area that you're proposing to do all that restoration work where the wetland is and so on, going out toward the road. I mean, I agree with you that it's a morass of invasives, no question. But that morass of invasives does provide habitat, and that's been sitting there for as long as I can remember, because I live up the road.
We're not
And-
denying,
and-
yeah.
And so, you know, I'm not sure what, I'm a little bit concerned about it. The other thing that I'm concerned about is that same morass of invasives and growth and vegetation keeps on going to the south. So your client's going to spend all this money to restore this. And you're gonna be spending the next millions of years standing guard at the boundary, because all these invasives will keep encroaching back. So, I guess it's a sort of a mystery as to why you want to invest that much money in it, but I guess that's your client's issue.
So we're not denying or arguing that there is some habitat value to what exists there now. We're asking to improve that habitat value. And this is, you know, a project that the client feels passionate about. There's no trees in there. She wants to have trees. In order to put the trees in, I would be irresponsible if I didn't remove the invasive vines, because they're just gonna grow up and choke out the trees. And that's just throwing money away. As far as, you know, the area to the south that has invasives, as in any project that we do, we try to keep our side of the street as clean as we can, so to speak. But there is going to be ongoing maintenance, making sure that we're protecting the native shrubs and that they're not aggressively overtaken by any invasive vegetation. As it stands now, this entire parcel is like an explosion of invasive vegetation. Like I said, to the point, it's growing into the telephone poles, into the overhead wires, you know, so it's providing a safety issue, you know, for the power and even, like I said before, the visibility of driving up and down the road.
Kevin,
I don't have any other questions.
No questions at this time.
that's it.
I have a comment, and then, actually, 2 comments. First comment is, I realize that this is just a general comment on any project that we have. This person may not want to kayak, this person may not go beyond Mr. Conley's border, et cetera. But any project that we do is what happens with the land. You don't know who they're gonna sell it to. So we have to make decisions based on that, not on what the owner may or may not want to do. And the second comment is, and I think you alluded to this, Jen, but I'm gonna make it more specific. I would like to see a list of what plants are gonna be there, and what the species are, and how many of each.
And where they're located.
There is a plant list that's in the packet.
I
It's
think
2
what
pages.
Betsy's saying is what I alluded to, she wants to see the distribution of the plants
Okay.
on the plan,
Gotcha.
okay? And I mean, we don't have to exactly do it in the
Sure,
field, but just kind of a
sure.
general distribution
Sure.
of the plants.
Yeah.
If, you know, one's not right where it says it is, that's fine.
Yeah.
But just so we can be very clear on these. plans.
Exactly.
You alluded to it, to
Yeah.
sort of where certain plants would
Sure.
be, but
And we had this discussion, Maria, that the plans
Exactly.
need to be a little bit more,
Yeah.
detailed in the, yeah.
And a lot of it, I'm sure you can appreciate this too, is based on the site conditions when you start clearing this stuff out. You can say, hey, geez, you know, this ground is wet, let's put Baccharis, let's put some winterberry, you know,
And I've gone to sites with you before
Yeah.
during, when the removal stage, when we've talked about, you know, alterations in the field that need to happen because of certain site conditions when the.
Exactly.
And we can phase it again like that.
perfect,
Okay.
perfect. If anything, I'm guilty of overplanting, you know.
That you are. Not, you're
Right?
not guilty of it, but you do densely plant.
I do densely plant because the goal is to provide a thicket of dense plantings. Nobody's gonna be able to walk in there. So Jennifer Linville, I have so much admiration for her. She's, you know, female business owner, started her own company, very successful, and she has recently sold her company. It's always been her dream to live on Cape Cod. She used to summer here as a child. So she's retiring and moving, and this is her forever home.
well, good, but you know what? None of us is gonna be here forever.
So we, like I said, we've respectfully come and requested permission to do this work to improve a property that has, in a sense, not had any attention paid to its invasive
Yeah,
species.
We understand that, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying, in general,
Yeah,
you can't make a statement because we don't know what's gonna happen to any of these properties. That's, you know, it's great that somebody wants to do that.
yeah.
Sure. Steve?
I think it's remarkable that you want to improve this entire area. Currently, I can understand that it's a good habitat for almost anything, I would guess, but it is certainly not attractive. And as you said, somewhat of a safety concern on the Chippewa side. So it seems an enormous project to take on, to take care of this. It's just, and then the ongoing maintenance will be life's work. But I don't have any other questions, just that comment. Peter?
Just a comment, I think it's a good project.
Thank you.
Excellent. Mark?
How do you plan to clear out the invasives from the green area?
Are you talking about down here around the wetland?
Around the
All
well?
of it.
Around the wetlands, that has to be done manually.
Man, you're not gonna just take a bulldozer.
Oh, God, no, no. And if it, I know I can't compare other jurisdictions, but I do have a project that's 120 acres that we're doing a big invasive species habitat restoration on. And we've been working on it, you know, for a couple of years, and it's absolutely amazing. If any of you ever want to take a drive, I'd be so excited and proud to show you. So we've done projects that are a lot bigger than this one, but certainly this is an amazing project, and we're excited about the opportunity to improve this part of town.
I'd sort of like to see, I guess, some kind of layout of where these plants are going. We're talking like 5,000 plants, and they're not gonna go on 3 feet centers, I sure hope.
Actually, we're pretty good at doing that.
I mean, just the whole thing, just
Yeah,
every 3
yeah,
feet.
yeah. And what we do is we do them in contours and bands, you
Yeah.
know, in the shape of the land, so it doesn't look like this militant planting. So I pride myself on being pretty good on the design part, so I like to weave, you know, clethra, winterberry, blueberry together, because they cross-pollinate and help provide more berries. The Baccharis is awesome. I want to put that all around the wetland, because there's nothing there right now. I did a project on, I think it might be called Mill Pond in Woods Hole, a long time ago, I don't know, 9 or 10 years ago, and we put Baccharis in, and we did 3 feet on center, and that's how I know that was too close, because they didn't have room to really grow and do what they wanted to do. But that was like right on the edge of a pond, and it came out fantastic.
It would be good to see a rough layout of where these things are going. You've got a lot of grasses here listed, but no, I can't tell if there's one plume of grass or if it's half an acre.
No, it's predominantly native shrubs, but if the site condition is, geez, I have roots of something underground, or I have a boulder, and I can't get a shovel in to put in the root ball of a native shrub, I have to put a grass in. But literally, the whole area will be revegetated. And the planting plan is based on the site conditions. So in other words, starting at your wetland, you have your fac plants that love to have their feet wet, that thrive in that environment. And as you get onto higher ground, then you move into your species that can handle it drier.
I think that's great. I'd like to see
Yeah.
a picture.
I can call you if you want to come out and
Drawing of what
watch.
it's gonna be, you know,
Yeah.
So we don't get surprised and end up with, it looks like a nursery.
Yeah, no, Jen and Brendan can probably vouch for this. I plant pretty densely on these projects, you know? It's hard to walk through after a couple years. Any other questions?
Good?
Just one quick follow-up. I think it would be useful from a constructive standpoint to have developed a maintenance plan so it goes out long-term, given the issues that you have to the south. It may keep the invasives from coming back. In other words, I mean, you know, this goes 3 years and extends to 5, you know, but this is gonna go on a lot longer. So,
Sure.
you know, I think you need to include in your thing a concrete plan for the maintenance, not just
Okay.
building this thing.
In Massachusetts and Rhode Island, I'm a certified invasive plant expert, so we've done a lot of these projects in the last 30 years. And I can tell you that one of the most important things is to try to get out as much of the root structure of the invasive plantings that you can. And when you replant, to start with new soil and compost so that your native shrub that you plant successfully roots in and becomes the dominant species versus the other way around.
No, I understand, but no matter what you do, you're still gonna have to have a
Absolutely.
maintenance program.
Absolutely,
Birds carry seeds.
absolutely.
Not this bird, but ones that fly. And they carry the seeds and up they come. So, you know, the little rhizome guys run along underneath and they don't respect boundaries.
I know. Good.
So I have a general question.
Sure.
Since you're an invasive expert and you must be removing a lot of invasives all over the place, what do you do with all that stuff? When you,
So-
probably there's a truck or a,
No, actually, so it's a great question. Typically, we have a burn permit, and we'll dig a big pit and put it and burn it. And I know that sounds kind of harsh. This one that would,
And that eradicates it?
yeah, it eradicates it.
that-
Yeah, it's the most responsible way to do it. I mean, I could send it to the brush dump. I know
yeah,
people.
we know that happens. And
Right.
we know what happens to the soil from the brush
Exactly.
dump.
But personally, professionally, that's the manner that
Yeah,
we
that's interesting. Okay.
take. And it pretty much destroys everything. Sometimes we make s'mores when we're doing it too.
Depends how much you're burning. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm wearing a mask when it's that.
Jen, are we looking at a continuance?
How long is it going to take you, Maria, to develop your plan?
I can have that to you by Friday morning,
Well, what,
or Monday if that's better.
no, slow.
You know me, I'm like,
Mike.
let's get it done.
So if you have your plan to us on the 24th, which is Wednesday,
Yeah,
and Mike, that includes your calculation on the visa, and you can't do it by Wednesday? And, yeah, put it on the plan, I don't think so.
I get my stuff in by May 1st for May 8th.
What was that?
Are you meeting on May 8th?
Yes, we just continue on to May
And you need it 1 week prior, so I can submit by May 1st.
8th. Okay, we'll be seeing you and Mr. McGrath again.
So at the
Nice.
request of the applicant, I make a motion to continue to May 8th.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board? Any comments from
Wait,
the
just one thing, sorry. Maria, make sure that you address Mr. Bird's, Commissioner Bird's request on a follow-up, like, maintenance, you know, monitoring plan for that. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Any comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote for continuance to May 8th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, unanimous. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Here I have. Continued hearings under a notice of intent. Patrick and Phyllis McDevitt, 5 North Chop Lane, East Falmouth, Mass. For permission to reconstruct existing stone riprap and incorporate new granite steps within riprap. This is continued, well, I have it down from the 3rd, I don't know.
Hang on, Mr. Chairman, I need to get a,
Yeah. You wanna know who's on it? Courtney, Betsy, Jamie, Steve, Peter, Kevin.
Jamie, Steve, Peter, Kevin.
Just can't vote.
Unless you have an affidavit.
Mike, before you start, can I just get the date of your plan? Because I had a whole
The latest revision is March 28th.
8th, yep, okay, thanks.
March 28th?
Should I proceed, Mr. Chairman? Thank you. For the record, Mike Boselli representing the applicant. This is a continuation of a previously heard public hearing. At the last hearing, I disclosed to you that we had discovered that previously required mitigation planting had been removed, and I still don't know why. But the plan showed that to be replaced. Then we went into a little bit more detail about the placement of the originally required mitigation planting, and Commissioner O'Brien made some comments about the, I'm gonna call it the south side. So we adjusted the configuration of the planting so that it meandered around the patio where the grill is, but still maintained the same area. We show a single rail fence around it on this side. Similarly, on this side, we show it running along. We added a note to remove the shed and relocate it to where it should be, outside the buffer, not where the mitigation planting was proposed. So you can see it moving from this location to this location. We calculated the volume of the sand ramp to gain access to the toe of the riprap for purposes of doing the work as 100 cubic yard, I'm sorry, as 15 to 20 cubic yards. That volume of sand would be incorporated into the total overall allowed cubic yardage of 100 cubic yards. We also revised the shading. It was left over from the original plan to go beyond mean low water. So we've shaded the area from mean low water landwood, which is what the original order of conditions allowed for beach nourishment, and we've indicated that with a note on the plan. We submitted, along with this plan, the original plan, landscape plan, by Heather Wright back in 2007 when the house was approved. And this itemizes all of the plant species that she proposed very clearly on the plan with symbols. So you'd have that, I think it should be in your file, but I wanted to submit it so that it was in the file. Not, you know, it was in the file from back in '07, but I gave you more copies. I think that sums up the plan revisions, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
Chapter 91, that was pending last time we talked.
Actually, the Chapter 91 plan is pending. Still, we've applied for it, and it hasn't been issued yet for the riprap.
wall's been there forever. Mike, was it 100 or 90 cubic yards that we approved in that last plan? It was 100? Okay, all right, just double checking. I don't doubt you, and, yeah. I can
Well, it was actually
correct you.
500.
And I can correct you when I write the conditions, so.
It's 100.
But thank you for clarifying the plan and showing the sand. I appreciate that. It was just I need really clear plans lately. Really clear. Okay, I have no questions, Mr. Chairman. Brendan, anything?
No.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying all that, Mike. Mark, you have any comments, questions?
You can ask
Okay.
questions, though.
All right, Peter,
No questions.
Steve,
No questions?
Betsy,
No, thanks for clarifying all those things.
Kevin?
Thanks for including,
Yeah, that
two
was helpful.
thousand seven, that was helpful. It does bring up one question. I take it in 2007, they put in some wooden stairs, and they didn't last too long.
Which is
Shocking.
why we're proposing to incorporate granite stairs.
Yep.
Courtney?
No questions.
Make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote, close the hearing, take it under advisement. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, so moved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next up, Stephen and Stephanie Kazak, 39 Jetty Lane, West Falmouth, Mass, for permission to remove invasive species and restore with native plantings. This was continued from 4/17, is it?
Oh, wait, one's,
Peter, Betsy, Kevin, Courtney.
okay.
I'm not on the forum, I will act as moderator.
Peter, Betsy,
Maureen's
Kevin,
not here, 'cause-
Courtney.
so we have a forum, though.
Yep.
All right.
Good evening. For the record, Jen Crawford from Crawford Land Management. I'll keep it pretty brief. I'd like to just go over the revisions that we made to the plan. The commission had requested that we use less of the small native shrubs and more of the larger maritime shrubs, such as bayberry and beach plum. So we reduced the number of smaller native shrubs by 53, and we increased and replaced with an additional 75 large shrubs, in addition to what was already there. We also removed the native grass and forward plug supplemental areas, and we, as requested, put in another set of boulder markers to the edge of the naturalized area to help delineate that. There was a request for an additional note to be added to the cedar groves that no mechanical removal of invasive species take place there and that all that work be done by hand. We added that note. And there was a suggestion from one of the commissioners that when the timbers get replaced along the existing path, that we switch to a type of wood that has a little bit more longevity, so we switched that to cedar. We believe that those revisions addressed the concerns that we heard from the commissioners. So with that, if you have more questions, I'm happy to try and address them.
John?
The only thing, thank you for the revisions to that plan. We had talked about the lawn area as well, and the commission expressed, how much lawn area is there now? Like, so the area that you're removing invasives, but just proposing to redo his lawn, what was that square footage again, Jen? I think you said it at the last hearing, I don't know.
I think it's on our plan. I have the plan with me. I can pull it up.
hang on. Well, area proposed lawn 4280. Does that sound right, Jen?
It does.
Okay. So again, this is removing, vegetation in your buffer zone. Although it's in your zone B, it's still the buffer zone. You have the discretion to allow it or not. I know this board has been told that, you can't, an applicant has the right, or, they can do whatever they want in zone B, and that is, according to your attorney, not correct. You have the discretion. You have seen, not just with this plan, with multiple other plans, these restoration projects and, you know, some of your fellow commissioners are really kind of getting concerned that these restoration projects are going from removing, yes, they're invasive, but replacing these areas with either turf lawn or, you know, wildflower pastures, perennial gardens. So I just want the board to be very kind of aware of what this slippery slope that you have been going down incrementally is becoming. We now have an area that is vegetated. It's in a velocity zone. Your regulations really do say that you cannot remove vegetation in a velocity zone. You've allowed it when there has been a restoration plan in its place, but we're seeing more and more of turf lawn, wildflower gardens, perennial beds, and I think it's a real slippery slope and a dangerous one that this board is going down, especially in an area such as this where you're in a velocity zone. So, that's my piece. The board can do what you would like. Thank you for the changes, Jen.
Yeah, no, I have enough information to make a decision.
Okay.
Thanks for the changes.
Evan?
I'll set for now, thank you.
Courtney?
I appreciate your delineating this area with boulders. We have even, I don't know, in the past, asked you for like a low fence or something like that. I think I don't want a boulder wall there, but I certainly want to see more boulders more clearly delineating that edge. Because you're talking about curves and so on, and you're talking about guys that mow lawns, and they're not following that line. So I'd like to see boulders, you know, like every 6 feet or so along that line, so that it's clear that's the edge. Now, you know, does that mean you have to continue this and do it again? No, I think if that's the only change the board suggests, then I think you could probably submit a revised plan before we vote the thing next week.
Could we maybe have the option to either do as you've suggested or to use a low, also as you suggested, split rail
low
fence?
what? I'm sorry.
Split rail fence, like a low one rail? Could we?
Single
could we
rail?
have-
That's fine.
Could we have the option so that we at least have a
Yeah,
chance to
either
talk it
way,
over?
I think the way you have them spaced,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much distance there that, you know, somebody's gonna,
Just making sure you're looking at the right plan.
yeah, I am.
Okay.
So, you know, either way, but it's gotta show on a revised plan, and if that's the only change, that's fine, but you gotta get it into us ASAP, so that we incorporate it when we do
I
our
think-
order conditions.
Jen asked if they could have the option either or, correct?
Yes.
We'll leave that as staff's
That's-
So we
discretion.
can, we
though.
can
Put it in an
condition that.
order of conditions.
Yeah, we can condition that and have a revised plan afterwards, Courtney.
Okay.
That's fine.
Good?
I do have one
No other questions?
question.
Peter?
No questions.
All right.
Jen has a question.
Jen, the last time, one of the commissioners had suggested that, you know, you incorporate maybe where you had your wildflower drifts and you use them to put in the lawn area. That was suggested at the last hearing by Commissioner Harler Hawks.
Yes, it
Was that considered at all?
It was considered, but because it was one commissioner that had a suggestion, we felt that we would come back to you with it
Okay.
the way that we did.
And it's not, if you think I'm just, you know, keying in on this plan, it's not just this plan.
Understood.
We're seeing a lot of plans like this, and we understand you're working for your clients, and clients want a certain thing. But this board is, you know, charged with protecting their wetland resource areas. So, thank you for the revisions that were made.
I'm gonna make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
We have a motion motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board? Any comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Close the hearing, take it under advisement. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. You were gonna vote, weren't you? Requests to amend the existing order conditions. First up, Michael and Brenda Doyle, 318 Acapasket Road, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to amend DEP number 25-4316 to install coir fiber rolls and beach access stairs from the dock.
Actually, I didn't see you sitting there in the back. Stealthed in. Yeah, stealth right in.
This has been lots of engineers, lots of landscape architects,
Everybody here tonight.
only one lawyer though.
Everybody heard my comments.
Pointing that out.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, again for the record, Michael Boselli from Falmouth Engineering. I represent the applicant. I'm joined tonight by Teresa Sprague of Blue Flax Design. You may recognize this property. In the recent past, you issued an order of conditions for a new dock, and there was also some buffer restoration and native planting proposed previously by and installed by Blue Flax Design. Part of that original review, there was a comment about some erosion at the toe of the coastal bank. So we're here tonight because the owner's concerned it could get exacerbated and get worse, so we're proposing to stabilize the toe of the coastal bank with a fiber roll system, the details of which are on the Blue Flax Design plan. And I'll turn it over to Teresa in a minute so she can go through that. The only other activity we're proposing is permission to provide a 4-foot wide set of side steps off the recently constructed pier. The reason for these is so that the owner can get access down onto the beach, because the path that used to go down to the beach and may have contributed to the erosion of the coastal bank is now occupied by the fixed pier, so it kind of blocks it, which is in a way, I think, a good thing, because it doesn't encourage people to traipse down onto the eroded coastal bank, but no way down, so to discourage that from happening, the stairs would allow, kids to get down and, walk around the beach and do what kids do on the water. So those are the two activities we're proposing. I'll be happy to answer any questions, but I'll turn it over to Teresa at this point to go over the core fiber roll design.
All right, you guys are gonna have to walk me through this, because again, Mac person, File Explorer here. Mike? I do. It's on my thumb drive.
You need a hand, Mike?
Yeah, I don't know where the file folder is
Yeah,
now.
where's the File Explorer on this?
It's because I gave Mike McGrath access to the file folder. Is it in presentations? You go up on the side right below the little circle with all the colors. It's called something, but I don't know what it's
Oh,
called.
you have it on the right drive.
What is this stuff?
There we go. USBF. That should be it. Oh, sorry.
I wasn't on this thing, I didn't go out to it.
Yeah, 318 Acapesky. Great,
I
thank you.
think it has trees.
That's hidden in the files folder for everybody to know in the future.
I think the
Good evening,
grass is
Teresa Sprague, Blue
close to
Flax
the house.
Design.
Up here.
Before, I just want to kind of go over a couple of things about the history of this project before, and address some of the comments Mike made about the erosion. So we were here to do a restoration plan mitigation for some violations by the previous owner, right before the Doyles owned the property. And part of that was to remove some non-native vegetation that had been planted within these areas here, to restore those with native vegetation. And then, on a plan that was previously submitted to you, there had been a pathway approved to go down through the bank in this area. The previous owners did not install that path and instead had installed a longer path that was actually a little bit more conducive to protecting the bank to get access to the beach. However, because it was not in the original plan, we were required to restore this area here that allowed this more meandering level path to come through and actually put in this path right here, which cuts right across the top of the bank, which was problematic, I think, in leading to some erosion issues, even though the way the previous owners had set up the path was not part of the previously approved plan. It was actually a better plan than what had been approved. In addition to that, see these stones down here, and I'll throw a few other pictures. The previous owners had installed a large granite step at the bottom leading down into the salt marsh area. And there were a number of stones that were also about this size that were put into the bank by the previous owner, I believe, to help stabilize the bank when they saw some erosion issues. We were required to remove that granite step, and we removed quite a few stones that were visible on the bank at the time. These stones that are here because they've eroded with the scarping that's happened since we removed the stones that were in front of that. So you can see these are stones that were exposed with this scarp. So they have had quite a bit of erosion since we came in and removed the stones and the large granite step down at the toe of the bank, and you can see that scarped area right there. And I think that scarping was apparent when they came in to permit the dock that's currently installed and was approved. So with that, that's why we're here now, to address that issue that the previous owner had addressed himself without permission from the Conservation Commission with these stones. And then once the stones were removed, the scarping continued, and additional stones that were planted into the bank behind that are now exposed and on the beach. So we are proposing to install a typical fiber roll array, coconut core logs, low density, 7-pound core logs. This isn't a velocity area. The area is about 50 feet, 50 linear feet. We're proposing, you can see from the section here, I'm gonna blow that up a little bit for you. We're looking at an array, can you see it? No. 3 logs high, about 50 feet long. We're looking at then, after that's installed, covering that to a depth of 6 inches, which is going to require about 7 cubic yards of compatible sand. The area will be accessed, all of the installation will happen above the bank, so all of the installation will be happening from this area here. In order to gain access down to this area, we will have to remove some of the shrubs that we had planted along the top of the bank. We will take those out, heal those in other areas, and then once the fiber roll installation is complete, we'll replant all of that vegetation down in here and back into the areas. As part of this, we are proposing some minor regrading of this path that has become worn through the dock installation, and you can see the steps in some of these pictures down here. Whoops, back and forth in the size of this. Let me show you a couple of photos of that. You can see where these steps had eroded away, and when the dock was installed, some of these steps were just displaced and kind of thrown to the side. So these steps were in areas leading down the bank where the dock was installed. And you can see that there's just some erosion happening. There was no ground cover got established. Water's just moving very quickly down this area, so it definitely needs to be addressed. Personally, the previous path, which ran along here, made much more sense, but we understand now that this now provides direct access to the dock, and so the property owners would like to keep it that way. But we will be accessing with equipment coming down here We'll be using a mini excavator and a walk-behind skid steer to access and do the excavation that's required to install the core logs, and all of that, like I said, will be done from the top of the bank, with handwork being done on the bank itself in the scarped areas. The installation is a typical installation. We'll be using duckbill anchors to secure the logs with cable running through in order to secure them in a typical installation pattern. The area will then be seeded. Any disturbance, the area will be seeded, it will be blanketed. The logs themselves will be plugged with a mix of native grasses, including switchgrass and then some salt meadow cordgrass on the lower portions. And then this area just to the east, I believe, there is still some additional invasive vegetation down in this area. There's a lot of rugosa rose. We're proposing to flush cut the rugosa rose. There's also a ton of poison ivy down here. The goal, again, is not to eradicate, but just to manage it so it doesn't overwhelm the area, and then let it sort of regrow on its own, and then to install some baccharis, some beach plum, and a little bit of bayberry in this area just to the east of where the fiber rolls are being installed. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about the conditions out there and the fiber roll installation.
Mike, I'm gonna ask you the question that Betsy's gonna ask you. Why'd you file this as an amendment?
Well, since during the original hearing for the dock, and I think it was even discussed in the order of conditions, it seemed like more efficient to ask for an amendment because it was somewhat related to the same area where the dock is. So we don't, instead of going through the whole effort of filing a new notice, we thought we'd just request an amendment since it was an open permit.
Oh. Well, so you're saying you feel that this project falls within the scope of the dock project?
Yeah, it's the access area to the dock, and we just thought it was.
It's the bank, it's replanting, it's removing mitigation, it's putting it back. It's a fairly large project. I'm saving you from that one right there. I'm just gonna let you know.
Look, that's why, and when we applied, no one suggested it was the
No, I
incorrect
understand,
way
but the
to do
commission
it.
might have it wrong, because it does take a significant amount of staff time to review something like this and that, and it just seems that this should have been probably a full-fledged notice. If the board decides to go that route, that's fine. If not, we'll make findings of that effect, and I don't want to, if the board allows this to go forward in the future, please don't file this type of project related to a dock again, okay? Just that. The removable stairs, Mike?
Yeah.
Are they going into the marsh?
They're seaward of the.
They're just sort of,
You can see the peat shelf, and they're seaward of the peat shelf right here. Here's the peat shelf, this
Got it.
double line.
okay, so they're right next to the marsh. And they are for,
Access.
didn't we discuss the stairs the last time during the dock project? I believe we did, about how they wouldn't need access to that area anymore.
No, I have no recollection of that.
Well, we discussed it, but I don't remember what we said.
Yeah, no, we discussed it. I know we did, because I think Mark brought it up. Maybe I'm thinking about a different one. Okay, as far as the proposal goes, Mr. Chairman, I don't think we have any concerns. Brendan, oh, he has some notes now.
Yep.
That's all. Okay, that's it, Jamie.
I just wanted to take a look at the order of conditions for the dock, because I recall it specifically stated in the order of conditions something about addressing the erosion on the coastal bank.
Okay, that's
So,
fine.
I'm just gonna look that over.
That's fine, it could address the erosion on the coastal bank. Under a new notice.
When does this expire?
That I have to check. Betsy's got it right in front of her. Oops, sorry.
was issued September 6th, 2017.
Yeah.
So it expires September
2020.
6th, 2020.
Plenty of time to get it done.
Mike, are the stairs for access alone, or is it a DEP situation
Shouldn't be the
for public access? Just, I wasn't here
The
for this
stairs
project.
the stairs are for access for the applicant. The dock has enough separation underneath it for public access. This is simply so there's a way to get down to the beach, because the dock, like I said, sort of blocks that access. You'd have to go around it, and you'd be encouraging people to walk down the bank when if the stairs were there, you wouldn't have to do that.
And these steps won't impede the public access?
No.
Thank you.
They're only on one side.
Mark?
I think this would be much more durable if you could pop some bait berries or beach plum into those rolls rather than just grass.
So we've been working on, because in order to put a shrub in, you have to make quite a large hole, which obviously destabilizes the log. But we have been working on, at the right time of year, using whips, so similar to willow that's used on riverbank restoration, with viburnum has worked really well. So we could certainly give that a try here. This wouldn't be the right time of year to do it. We'd want to wait until next winter, right before spring, but we could certainly give it a try.
It looks like a pretty calm spot anyway.
It-
so
it
it's
is.
Probably okay, but.
Yeah. Yeah, we just don't want to,
Better to make it consistent with the rest of the bank, the rest of the slope. It's not
Agreed.
really a bank. It's-
yeah, no, I agree. And I think working with whips of viburnum is something that we're working on with other fiber roll installations. The concern is we don't want to do anything that's going to sort of destabilize the roll by cutting large holes into it. Yeah.
Anything else?
That's all.
Peter?
No questions.
Steve? No question. Betsy?
Okay, I'm gonna say, when I saw this, I couldn't figure out how it could be an amendment to a dock application, and I still can't. I don't have a problem with the steps, though. I mean, people might wanna go clamming from there, or whatever.
Well, if I could just, Mr. Chairman, address that. My interpretation of what an amendment is an amendment doesn't have to be specific to an activity that was approved. It's an open permit, and there can be sort of components adjacent to on the same site, and it's just an efficient way to review a project instead of filing a whole new notice. That was our thinking. I mean, I think it's a project that you would support. We're trying to stabilize the bank. If I had known that there was a problem with it as a new notice when I filed, it would have been nice to know, and I could have immediately refiled as a notice, but that
So-
was 3 weeks ago.
But I'll just read this to you. The commission shall make a determination whether the requested change is of a relatively minor nature and can be considered as an amendment to the original permit. The commission shall consider such factors as whether the purpose of this project has changed, whether the scope of the project has increased, whether the project meets relevant performance standards, and whether the potential for adverse impacts to the protected statutory resource area values will be increased. Relatively minor changes which result in the same or decreased impact on the resource area values protected may be considered a minor change. So I don't consider, I consider this a major change to the original project, but I'm just one of the commissioners. But in the future, I would prefer something like this.
Well, yeah, I understand that. I guess I didn't really look at it that way. I thought this was a positive project to stabilize
Well,
the bank.
it is positive, but it could, if not done properly, this is something Mark's has looked at. If not, those fiber rolls are not stabilized properly, it can make a mess.
I understand your point.
Yeah, I think Teresa did a good job in her plan in giving us a lot of information as to how it's gonna be done. So that gives me a little bit more confidence than just a page that we're gonna do an amendment. but, so this is just for the future. I mean,
Sure, I understand.
Is this subject to, can it be subject to additional conditions?
Oh, it will be
Absolutely.
subject
Oh,
to
yeah.
additional conditions, but I don't wanna get into the habit of having condition a project that should have been coming under a different thing. So, again,
I just think it should have been addressed as,
no,
if
we
it,
should
if it should have been an NOI separate, that should have been addressed prior to us
Wish I
getting
had
it.
known, I could have the next day filed a form for the notice, I didn't know. This is the first I've heard of it, the night of the hearing. I wish I had known. I could have immediately done a notice.
It's been before this board a lot, and the staff had a newer person reviewing this stuff. We'll talk to them.
That's okay.
Just-
I mean,
Yeah, we'll
this
go
particular,
forward,
there's so much
But to
information
say we
here.
didn't know,
Let's just not make it a habit, that's all.
yeah.
I didn't say I didn't know, I said if I had known when I filed, I could have immediately filed the notice the next day because it's a form.
Right, we're just moving ahead.
Kevin,
No questions.
Courtney?
Yeah, the same Betsy's comments, I'll echo those. I think that she's right, and we're on the edge of a major or a minor. But as far as putting it in there, I don't have a problem with it, other than, it's one of those marginal issues. I wonder out loud, is this one of these situations where there's a sort of law of unintended consequences of doing a project? In other words, is the erosion that's there, was it exacerbated by the construction of that deck?
It definitely
Yeah,
was.
I mean, that's not to say you shouldn't fix it, I'm just
Right.
saying. I'm wondering out loud on that.
Yeah, no, I think what was happening was there was erosion happening previously, with the previous property owner. And that property owner was just, installing stones down here at the toe of the bank on his own, to deal with an issue that he saw and he was concerned about. And I think it just became, the erosion worsened when we removed most of those stones as part of the mitigation when the house was changing hands, and it was made apparent that for some reason, a violation was never dealt with, and there was an enforcement order outstanding, and when the Doyles were purchasing the home, it came to light at that time. And so we were brought on by the Doyles, the new property owners, the current property owners, to handle an issue that had started under the former property owners, and it's just one of those things that, yeah.
And refresh my memory, was this dock that we permitted a year or two ago, is this a replacement, or was this all brand new?
It was all brand new.
Okay.
And you use the term unintended consequences. I actually think it's like the opposite of that. Ironically, I think the dock will prevent erosion because people won't walk down the bank now.
No, but I mean, just where it's located in relative to the thing, was there some dynamics that the dock construction itself created to make the erosion worse?
No,
And,
the erosion
you know,
was-
we don't need to answer that question. I'm really wondering out loud
Oh,
here.
okay.
It's not so much that I have an issue, but it's something that, when we're permitting these things, we ought to, as a commission, consider something along that line. What's the effect of a dock? That's all. We don't need to belabor it anymore.
It's not the dock, it's the fact that, I mean, it looks calm, but obviously there's some erosion, and obviously there are times in a storm where,
Yeah.
Yeah.
where waves lap against there, and if you put stones, that's gonna dampen the amount of energy. And if you remove those stones,
Right, and that's, I think, what's happening. There was right down here, there was a huge piece of granite. And we literally had to come in with a jackhammer to get it out because we couldn't get a machine down there to lift it out. So there was a huge stone down here that was, sort of, again, deflecting the wave energy, and then the additional stones that were embedded into the bank and had been covered over with soil over time. So I think pulling those stones out, and then you can see what remains of those are now just exposed on the beach, so.
Okay, fair enough.
Mark?
No other questions?
Well, I think we're getting into a little fix here because we're evolving away from, to my mind, away from this is a simple modification to a previously approved order of conditions, or are we dealing with a problem which we really haven't addressed even the cause. We're talking about, is this because there's more erosion from the sea, or it looks like there's a lot of erosion coming from the bank also, going down and washing out that area? And I don't know, without any facts about it, I'm not sure that we've got a solution that's gonna solve that. I mean,
I
if we,
think this will, if you put core fibers there, it's gonna help,
the mat will help a lot. The mat will be the big
It'll
help. The
help.
core will help maybe from the
will help both
upwash.
ways, yeah.
But the mat, I think, is the big thing that will help.
I'm gonna make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion from the board? Jen? Any comments from the public? Can we have public comment on that amendment?
Sure, yeah,
Okay.
it's a public hearing.
Hearing none?
Public can comment.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of closing the hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? None, unanimous, so moved. Thank you. Next. Kevin Skelly, 258 Edgewater Drive East, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to amend DEP 25-4362 to revise the construction access and remove 2 trees. Thank you.
Are we 258?
Appropriate for an amendment, it's, yeah, I think it is.
Bonus.
For the record, my name is Michael Boselli, Falmouth Engineering, and I represent the applicant. This property owners of, the Skellies are in the audience. They have an interest in the property. If you remember, this, an order of conditions was issued for this property to allow them to repair the existing stone revetment on the seaward side of the property. There's a coastal beach area, land under the ocean, and of course the revetment, which is a coastal bank. And there's land subject to coastal stone flowage in the form of, on the very seaward edge of the property, a VE 14. We've also shown the 25-foot V-zone line. When the project was originally proposed, there was a construction access on the south boundary. At the time, it was anticipated that there would only be a need for a small bobcat to make access that way, and that all of the work was contemplated to be, the heavy lifting, if you will, was contemplated to be done by barge to get access for the crane. In talking with the contractor and going over the cost to do the work and the potential impact to the bottom from the barge, it became clear that a better alternative would be to move the construction access to the north side of the property as shown on the plan. It would eliminate the need for a barge to be coming near shore, which has a potential, even if you try to work with the tides, to cause issues to the substrate, and is exceedingly expensive to do any work by barge, you can imagine. So, as an alternative, we're asking to amend the approved construction access from this location to the north side. The issue with the north side is, even though it's relatively clear access, there are 2 trees that are in the way. One we're proposing to remove is a small holly. I think it's a 6-inch diameter holly located right here next to this stone retaining wall. And the other is a 14-inch cedar tree in this location. That's the only way we could use this side for access. As mitigation, if you were to approve this, after the work is done, the applicant was proposing to install 4 new cedars down at the, in the area of the top of the revetment, and there's a lawn area in this location. So this is solely a request to amend the access, allowing us to remove the 2 trees and then plant 4 trees in place to facilitate the access to do the repairs. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mike, where's this, the I know, I think Brendan told me this, the existing septic is under the paved drive?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so it's not
but-
gonna be impacting the septic?
No, but there's a proposal to put a new septic in,
Yeah,
and that's proposed to be in this area. It hasn't been installed yet.
okay, so we're gonna do the wall before the septic? Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
All right, and the only other thing is the trees, do you really wanna put the trees that close to the top of your brand-new revetment? Wouldn't it be better if you had some shrubs that maybe the root systems wouldn't be so damaging to a newly constructed wall? Just throwing that out there.
We can shift the trees around. We'd look to
Yeah.
the staff for guidance on that. There is a proposal to do some shrubs layer along the top that was in the
Yeah,
original.
I think you might want to, just for longevity of that wall.
Well, I think what you're saying is shift these trees back somewhat.
Yeah, I would, just, you've seen what,
Yeah, you don't want them right next to the
you
rocks.
don't want them right next, you don't want them damaging the wall, you've seen what they can do to roads, driveways, septics, I mean, it's great when it's a spot on a plan, but in reality, it can,
We were trying to create like a grove. There isn't.
I understand the concept, I appreciate that, I just think, if you shift that away from the top of the wall, you're gonna be better off in the long run. Just my
That's
2 cents.
That's fine.
We can condition that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything, Brendan?
No, I spoke with Mike about this one, I'm all set.
See, Mike, shifting your construction access, that's an amendment.
I'm glad this one was second.
Good.
Yeah, that's fine.
Peter?
This is fine.
Mark?
No comment.
Steve? No comment. Kevin?
No questions.
Wow, got that, huh? Courtney?
No questions.
Betsy?
I have no questions.
All right.
This was a clear amendment to me.
Take a motion, take it under advisement.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board? Any comment from the public? Hearing none, a call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Unanimous, so moved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank
Good
you.
luck. Be nice to have that little grove of cedars, but a little bit further back from the wall. All right.
Hopefully, next time we can schedule you a little earlier in the evening.
Probably.
Educational, right?
All right, next up, Noah and Caroline Clements, 21 Little Lane, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to amend DEP number 25-4343 to revise the location of proposed dwelling and reconfigure the driveway.
It's so nice to see Raoul.
Raul, welcome.
we haven't seen you in a while.
Good evening. For the record, Raul Lizardi from Cape and Islands Engineering. And I think I'm the one that now needs help getting to the right location for these files.
What's 86 West Vineyard? Whoever organized this today did a wonderful job.
Just send her an email and let her know that.
I will. It was very easy to follow.
Even I could have done it.
I'm sure you wouldn't have to use it.
Representing the applicant, Raul Lizardi from Cape and Islands Engineering. The proposed project is to amend an existing order of condition that was issued last year in February, if I'm not mistaken. The amendment is due because after this past year, the homeowner or the property owner is proposing a new configuration of the house. So this is a completely different house. The approved order of conditions with the approved plans from last year showed a house that was a walkout design. This proposed house is not proposing a walkout, so there's not as much excavation on the back of the property as before. The septic system remains as designed previously. The revisions also show that the setbacks previously approved to the edge of the waters of Bourne's Pond and the edge of the BVW are increased by approximately 5 feet. Also, the setback to the existing coastal bank is increased by approximately 3 feet. And that's practically the revisions. There is no requirement for additional plantings. The original application was proposing enough planting to render the same area of buffer zone A fully planted. The exception was that we have a 4-foot path that we're maintaining. The area of the 4-foot path is added to the mitigation area as previously, so that doesn't change. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
No question.
She has no question.
Okay,
I have no question.
really?
I have no questions.
No questions.
No questions.
No questions?
It's better.
Wow, full house.
It was beautiful, though. I said, where is this place? Have I been here before? And I went out and I went, oh, this is so
Well,
pretty.
I'll move to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
I'd second that.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the board? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, unanimous, so moved.
Thank you.
Use it again.
Again,
I
if
found
you
my
had
other
been
agenda.
first tonight, we probably would have been in a much better mood for the whole thing.
Would you like to schedule the agenda, Kevin?
Oh, no.
Either that or it
Usually
would have
beat
taken
him up.
forever.
Request to extend the existing order of conditions. Ray Samuels, 86 Weston Road, North Falmouth, Mass. For permission to extend DEP number 25-4195 by 3 years.
So the applicant requested 3 years. I told him he can request whatever he would like, but I think he only really has to do the plantings left. The house is pretty much done. He has some interior work to be done, but he just has the
Give
plantings.
him a year.
It's-
That's
yeah.
Is that what we're saying? I make a motion to give him a year.
Yep.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of 1 year extension, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, unanimous, so moved. All right. Orders of conditions.
Quorum.
First up, Town of Falmouth, care of James McLaughlin, DPW, 0 Oyster Pond Road, map 50-05-017A-000, Falmouth, Mass.
All right. Give me a second, this was just thrown in front of me. Quorum, Mark, Peter, Betsy, Maury, Kevin, Courtney. So Mark, Peter, Betsy,
Oh, this is the bike path.
yeah,
When was this closed?
Right.
Gotta
This
be
was
somewhere on the other end.
on the 3rd.
He can-
Let's do next week. Bike path, the cobble berm along the bike path.
It was, I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
Very.
I mean, are there any conditions you guys can think of? Is there any time of year
I
restriction?
know what,
was just
we'll-
gonna say, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we'll do the time of year restrictions. I believe there is.
Well, I think he was gonna ask for you can ask for
They'll ask for a
some
waiver.
kind of a waiver.
Yeah.
With a monitor and.
Time of year that we'll do the toys. We'll meet with DPW prior to them doing the work,
Right.
just to kind of go over the methodology. Pre-construction meeting.
How long did they say that would take, did they think? I mean, it
Did not
doesn't,
hear the beginning of that conversation.
it doesn't matter, but
Just wanted to know how long the work was gonna take. I thought he said 2 weeks, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter. It has to be done.
Yep, okay. Pre-construction, I don't have anything else compatible. Compatible sand, cobble, yeah.
I'll move to accept as discussed.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the order as discussed. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Unanimous. Next up, Nasir and Kay Khan, 434 Seacoast Shores Boulevard, East Falmouth, Mass.
I believe this was to reconstruct the existing dock. I believe they have like quite a good number of pilings that are just completely rotted out. It's just the dock reconstruction
Yeah,
on
the
this one, am I right?
The only-
Illegal.
One of them was.
Can I read the quorum, please? Mark, Peter, Betsy, Maury, Kevin, and Courtney.
Warren's not here, so
I
you don't
just
have
wanna
to
read the
her
whole
name.
quorum for Susan.
He's reading the
We have
proper
four,
quorum.
She's not here, she can't
She's
vote.
here in spirit.
I doubt it. I hope she's not, I hope she's not thinking about Concom.
This one for notes, we have an illegal float that needs to be removed.
Yes.
2 extra pilings, which need revised plans showing 10 pilings.
Yeah, I was gonna say, remember what we had our
Yeah.
10 and 12?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then time of year restriction for Tom Cod.
That's right, for Tom Cott.
Tom Cod, revised piling, revised plan, reduce pilings, and remove
You
illegal
missed that.
float.
That's, I asked
Hey,
about that.
one meeting.
So I'll move to accept as discussed.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, unanimous, so moved. Next up, and I apologize, I'm gonna slander these names. Lori Pierangeli and
Wait a minute.
Christine
Oh.
Pipsinski, 361 Shorewood Drive, East Falmouth, Mass.
Well done.
Nailed it.
Pretty close.
Sorry.
Quorum.
Quorum, please.
Same.
Mark, Peter, Betsy, Kevin, Courtney. Maury.
There's a proposed pool and deck just inside of our jurisdiction.
This was pretty straightforward. wasn't it?
Mhm.
We had no comments,
They
right?
were putting some mitigation plantings in.
I move that we accept as discussed.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, unanimous, so moved.
Okay.
Last up, Kay Khan, number 438 Seacoast Shores Boulevard, East Falmouth,
This was
Mass.
an amendment or extension?
Amendment, doing some deck work in the front, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
No more increase in velocity zone
Right.
after this.
Wait, there's something about this one though. Something about this one.
Only other note says 11 by 17 code plan from June 2018. That means
State Senator.
17. Oh, from the original close date.
No, I don't have anything on this one. I thought I was fine with this.
Yeah, I think so too. I move that we accept.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion from the board? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, unanimous, so moved. Before anybody jumps,
Oh, no, I have some stuff.
270 Sipawissa.
I think that's
What?
going to be next week.
What? So yes, so that's, I have a few announcements to make. 270 Sipawissa, we were gonna have an executive session tonight, but Frank opted for next week. You also have your potluck dinner next week, so,
How busy are we?
We have at least 3.
hang on. We have, a handful of RDAs, we have like 5 RDAs, 3 new notices, and,
Is it
one
continued?
continued. And then we'll have the executive session. We will start the executive session right at 7 o'clock with Frank Duffy. Okay? And it's to discuss that document. Okay?
You guys all got that? 7 o'clock?
Okay?
To discuss,
Yep, an executive session item.
The meeting, and that's the first part of the meeting.
yeah, okay.
Okay? 2, for those of you going to the potluck, I will get together with you after this meeting Okay, I know, Peter, you're intending to going, and Courtney, I know you're pushing your fiber optics, I saw your picture in the paper. You'll be attending, and so anybody else, we'll discuss afterwards what we can do. And just one other thing I wanna mention is summertime's coming, we're going out to these sites, just everybody, if we can knock on the doors, people are intending to open up their houses, we don't know who's down anymore. They're not down officially full-time yet, most of the people, but we've kinda, you know, I know most of us, you know, at least the staff does, we always knock on a door when we enter a property, just reminding everybody to do that when we go out there, okay? Because these houses aren't vacant anymore right now, so.
You might get to see a big Great Dane, or two
Yes,
Great Danes.
two Great
Yes,
Danes.
so, yes. So, just as
They were
a
easy to
quick
see.
reminder, just a little bit of housekeeping, and that's it.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Oh, stop.
Oh,
Mark?
Yeah, some of you may remember before I disappeared, I was agitating for having somebody tell us something about how to deal with mitigation planting and how to space it and group it so it really is a wildlife sanctuary instead of just everything on 3 feet centers. And that project we had today is one. We've got almost an acre there, which right now we have no idea what she's gonna do with it. You know, she said, oh, I know about it, and I know how to do it, but that's all we know, and we don't have any idea if she knows how to do it and what she's gonna do. I think, Jen, I think it'd be great if we could have somebody talk to us about this.
Hi, I'm not gonna do it, but I have been in touch with the new circuit rider for the southeast region from DEP.
Oh.
Andrew, and his last name escapes me, but, I've talked to him through emailing in person, and he's gonna put in a presentation, 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever you guys are willing to do. He's willing to come down on Wednesday night if you wanna put him on the agenda. He's willing to drive down and present to you guys, he's willing to send it to us as a PowerPoint or PDF that we could distribute to you guys, that you can look at it on your own time. So it's really up to you. He's more than willing to come down and chat with us.
That sounds great to me.
Love to have people.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm come down.
We
and-
haven't forgotten about you, Mark. Brendan was right on that. We also, and I've wanted to do this for a while, and I think Jamie, you and I have talked about this in the past, is having some of the people, definitely the group you saw tonight, present some of their projects in Falmouth, maybe even in a different town, before, during, and after. So you do get a sense of when these projects are completed, what they look like. Teresa did a big one, Blue Flax Design on the Cape Codder. It
I was
looks,
just gonna say, could we have a field trip? Could
yeah,
we
it looks
have a-
amazing.
Organize
You
a
know,
field trip, 'cause I think.
done step-by-step with Maria Hickey Landscaping on a project out in North Falmouth that came out really well. I know that Jen's done some great projects under her former employer, and she's doing some, really big restoration projects now. We saw the one that, were you with me, or was it Kevin? Where they were helping, the Quistit Harbor Trust do the invasive removal out on that big bank restoration project. I believe her husband did the
By Kerry-
invasive work.
Kerry Lane?
Yes, and they did a really great job doing that invasive removal. Now, that's still being planted and everything. But I'm gonna look at your schedule and maybe schedule the new DEP circuit rider, and then have everybody give like a 15-minute presentation. I'll get all the people you've seen, often, and some others in town that have done some work to kind of present. So you get kind of a comfort level that, yes, these things look really kind of awful when they're first,
And so does a construction site.
but so does a construction site. So they really do come out really nice.
And could we, I would really like to take a field trip also. Could you organize a field trip, maybe in a month or so, when
things are blooming.
things are blooming? And
Okay.
Things will be.
I mean, it might be really hard to schedule everybody on one day, but I can try. We can
Right,
try.
right,
We'll
I
just
mean,
throw it
try it.
out and we'll pick a day.
2 alternate days and.
Yeah, 2 alternate days. We'll pick a day and we'll say,
Be nice to see the stuff that we approve.
yeah,
like,
absolutely. And that's what I'm saying,
Negative,
they
but
can
something
come
that
in and
doesn't
give
work.
a, like a PowerPoint on what you've approved. You know, some of the ones, at least for maybe Gen X, or Crawford Ecological, they might not be, you know, cause they've only, think, been on their own for a couple of years. Blue Flags, definitely, Maria has a couple. I know that, Ms. Crawford has some under her former,
They all have something they'd wanna
They all have something they're going to want to show, and as well as I'd invite, Wilkinson,
Yeah,
even I think maybe Joe Waller has a few, there are a couple other.
remember when we had the
Landscapers.
field trip to Salpon?
Mm-hmm,
That was a good field trip, and then you can go back
and look,
and
yeah,
look.
yeah, absolutely, okay.
So you can always
DEP.
add little Sipawis and Marsh onto that too. That's that restoration, that Phragmites control project?
Yeah.
DEP.
I know why you wanna do that one.
Are you
Yeah,
inviting
so
us
you
all-
guys could come
Are you
by
inviting
and,
us all to your house?
and have a viewing and a beer.
Yeah.
The B word always comes into play.
No, just, I mean, how long would you want that presentation to be? He said he could talk for an hour, he could talk
No.
for 10 minutes.
15 to 20 minutes.
20 minutes,
Yeah.
15, 20
And
minutes.
make sure if you have people come in, you
Short and
tell
sweet.
them
Not too short.
10 to 15 minutes.
Sort of
No
important.
more, or.
I'll send it out. I think it's, think it's important. I really
I
do.
agree.
What did she say?
10 or 15 minutes.
They know
So
ahead
then
of
if
time.
they
they
go,
can-
But advise
They
them
go
he'll have
18
at least
minutes,
twice that
we
much
don't
of
have to-
questions.
Right, but if they know ahead of time that there's a time limit,
Right.
if they think it's 15, if it's 20, that's not bad.
Right. Betsy's.
yeah, maybe.
That's the other thing is,
Did we
you know,
adjourn?
We need a second
on the
I think we need to close.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
All that was on.
Better not be.